We are now ready to begin.
Welcome to the Forum for Candidates for Alderman for the 4th and 8th Wards in Evanston. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Evanston and the Evanston Public Library. My name is Lois Taft, and I serve on the Board of Directors of the League. The League of Women Voters is a national, nonpartisan political organization dedicated to promoting the active and informed participation of citizens in government. The League takes positions on issues, but neither endorses nor opposes candidates for public office. This forum is being recorded and will be available on demand on YouTube with links to the video on our League website. In addition to questions from League members and community partners, the public was invited to submit questions for this forum. The deadline for questions was 48 hours prior to the beginning of the event. The League has reviewed the questions for appropriateness for the office, to ensure that questions are directed to all the candidates, and to eliminate duplication. All candidates for wards 4 and 8 aldermen were invited to participate in this forum. With us today are Ward 4 candidates, Diane Goldring and Jonathan Newsma. For the 8th Ward, candidates Matthew Marley Mitchell and Devon Reed. Our moderator for today's forum is Jan Flappen of Chicago. Jan is past president of the League of Women Voters of Chicago and the League of Women Voters of Illinois. She's also served 2 terms as a board member of the National League of Women Voters. She's a former teacher and executive director of a small social service agency. I'll turn it over to you, Jan.
Thank you, Lois. First, I want to summarize the format. The candidates will make opening statements of 90 seconds. Then each candidate will have up to 90 seconds to respond to each question. I'll call on candidates to respond in rotating order, with Ward 4 going first for the first 4 questions, then Ward 8 will go first for questions 5 to 8. If we have time for more than 8 questions, we'll rotate again. All candidates will answer each question. The closing statements are also limited to 90 seconds. The opening and closing statements and responses to questions will be timed. A League member will keep time, and all candidates and I can see the timer. As moderator, I'll enforce the time limits and the rules that the candidates agreed to. Now we'll begin with opening statements. They'll be in alphabetical order by last name. Candidates were asked by the League to give their qualifications and their top 2 priorities for the next 4 years. The opening statements will be Ward 4 will go first, candidate Goldring.
Hi, thank you to the League of Women Voters and to Evanston Public Library for hosting this forum. I'm honored to participate. I'm Diane Goldring, and I am running for 4th Ward Alderman. I am running because I am deeply committed to the city, and we need a city council that serves all of Evanston. I grew up here. I went to Oakton and Chute and Evanston Township High School, and I returned to earn my MBA at Northwestern's Kellogg Graduate School of Management. In my professional life, after Kellogg, I spent 9 years in banking, primarily in small business finance, so I understand the needs of our small business community. Most recently, I spent 20 years as the director of client support for a small tech company, where I developed close relationships with my customers and helped them address their business challenges. Although this is my first run for public office, I have a long history of community leadership and advocacy. I have created, led, and volunteered in organizations that serve families of children with special needs, youth, seniors, and those experiencing homelessness. On a personal level, I'm a single mom with 1 teenage son. And I think this next year is going to be challenging. My first priority is to rebuild from COVID, which includes making sure everyone is vaccinated as soon as possible, and that we are meeting our residents' basic needs, such as food and housing. and finding ways to revitalize our small businesses. As alderman, I will lead a responsive and engaged office and ensure we develop a budget that reflects our community's progressive values. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Newsman.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you to the league for we're almost at the end here. I know we've all put in a lot of time, and certainly you have as well. My name is Jonathan Newsma. I'm running to represent the people of the 4th Ward on Evanston City Council. I'm running because it's time for a change. I believe that the people of the 4th Ward deserve to be represented by a government that's responsive and engaged and transparent. And I believe my background, both professionally and on a community basis, have prepared me for this responsibility. Professionally, my background is in engineering. I've spent a career over 25 years working in manufacturing, supply chain development, and clean energy, which has allowed me to develop skills of analyzing complex problems and collaborating to find effective and cost-effective and practical solutions. On a community basis, I have served as president of Citizens Greener Evanston. I've served on the board of Citizens of the Democratic Party of Evanston. I have served as chairman of the city's Utilities Commission. So I've been a part of the process and would like to put this experience to work for the people of the 4th Ward. My priorities are to make Evanston as equitable as possible, as environmentally sustainable as possible. I want to make sure that we are doing economic development appropriately. And I believe we can do this work if we come together with an engaged and responsive city council. I've been endorsed by Reclaim Evanston, and
Thank you. Thank you.
Look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thanks.
Now Ward 8 will give their opening statements. Candidate Mitchell is first.
Thank you. Thank you to the league and to the library for hosting us today. My name is Matthew Mitchell, and I'm very excited to be the next 8th Ward Alderman. I grew up in Evanston. I'm married and have 2 young kids who are in kindergarten and 1st grade at Oakton. Go Cougars. They're both in the TWE program. And my wife and I are both involved in the Oakton PTA and the Oakton community. We love the 8th Ward, love the south side of town. I'm running for alderman because I believe that our ward needs progressive new leadership. And I think we need to work together to create the city that Evanston deserves. We need a city council that can work together to get things done. And I'm the right person for the job. I have a professional experience in advocacy and conflict resolution. I'm an attorney and I own my own practice. I've previously worked for the City of Chicago Law Department. So I'm very familiar with municipal law. And the City of Chicago can be a beast, but it also can use its home rule powers to its advantage. And I think that's something that Evanston can look at. The issues that I'm really excited about are reimagining policing. I think Evanston can and should be a national leader in policing, in equity and sustainability. I think Evanston's greatest assets are the people that make up our community, and that the City of Evanston government needs to do a better job of getting those voices to the table. That's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Candidate Reed.
Yes, always happy and honored to be here with the League of Women Voters and all of the other participants in this forum. So thank you for hosting this rich discussion, what will be a rich discussion, and for all of the work that the League does. My name is Devon Reed. I am the current city clerk of Evanston. I was elected 4 years ago at the ripe old age of 24. And in my term, I have focused on issues of transparency, resident engagement, and equity. And we've been leaders on those issues. And I'm very proud of the record that we've been able to accomplish over the last 4 years. You know, my professional experience outside of being clerk, I've been a part of leading statewide advocacy efforts that have led to passage of statewide legislation such as automatic voter registration, which is key to increasing public participation in our democracy. I've worked at chambers of commerce to help small businesses stay afloat. And so with that experience, I think, and I've worked on a number of issues relating to sustainability, particularly the nexus between sustainability and environmental justice by focusing on food waste. So when I think about the issues of, my top two priorities, well, it's about meeting the moment. And we need an alderman who can meet this moment. And in this moment, the 8th Ward alderman will be leading on reparations, will have to be a leader on equity, and will have to be a leader on sustainability, because I think that is the issue of the future, and I'm prepared to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will go to the questions, and we are going to start with Ward 4, and candidate Newsma will answer the first question. We'll be first with the first question. As you work to create a balanced Evanston budget, would you reduce city staff? Which programs or services would be impacted? And you're muted.
Here I am, sorry. Thank you for that question. A very important question. One of the primary, if not the primary responsibility of the Evanston City Council is to look out for the financial best interests of the residents of Evanston and make sure that our taxpayer money is being spent wisely. We are already operating on a budget which is fairly pared down. I would not look to reduce headcount in any specific departments, although I would like to take a very close look at our public safety budget and see if there is a way that we can better align our public safety budget with the communities of our, with the values of our community. I suspect we might be getting into some more detail on that question later on in this forum, so I won't get into too much of that right now. But on the topic of the city budget, my priority will be to make sure we are spending taxpayer money wisely. I don't want to raise taxes again. I just paid my tax bill a few days ago, and I think it went up something like 13% in the last few years. I understand that the city of Evanston's slice of that dollar bill is only a portion of that, but let's spend our money wisely. Let's not waste it on frivolous and ill-fated lawsuits that cost the city $8 million in the case of James Park litigation. Let's look for ways we can save money working collaboratively with Northwestern.
Thank you. And I'll just remind the candidates, before you start speaking, please check to see if you're muted. Candidate Goldring, you are next.
Thanks for the reminder. Yes, as Jonathan said, the priority of an alderperson is to make sure that the city budget represents our constituents' progressive values. And as alderman, I plan to do that. We absolutely need to keep an eagle eye on our budget and to make sure we are not spending money on things like, as Jonathan said, a lawsuit, James Park lawsuit. There's some questions still about what happened to some of the money that went into Robert Crown. There's questions about how we spend our money. Do a comprehensive audit across the board. As far as city staff, I don't think that if we keep a closer eye on budgeting, that we would actually need to reduce city staff. I think we would have enough to spend on our city staff. So overall, I just think we need to keep a closer eye on the things that, most of the things that we are spending our money. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Ward 8, and candidate Reed will be first.
Yes, thank you for this question. You're right. I think we have to go to the core of it, and the real core is, no, we cannot cut city staff. We need every single body and all hands on deck here in our city. What I do think we need to do is, years ago we did priority-based budgeting. We tried that out, but we didn't put everything up. The city manager at the time kind of hand selected what was on that priority-based budgeting menu. And I think we do have to have a participatory process where the residents get to look at each line item in our budget and have a real thorough discussion about the things that we think we need to adjust. I think it is quite adamantly clear that the police department is one of those places where we think we need to not cut staff, but reallocate those resources to better meet our goals of public safety. But also, we need to expand the pie, and we need to make sure that we're setting ourselves up on a strong financial footing for the future. And one of the things I've looked at, someone who cares deeply about issues of sustainability and issues of equity and transportation, our parking fund. We know that this year our parking fund took a several $million hit. I think looking into the future, knowing that we need to get more vehicles off the road, we have to prepare and account for a reduction, permanent reduction in our parking fund revenues. And also the big ticket is an NU pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes.
Thank you.
And we'll get into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Mitchell.
Thank you. I do not think that the city can cut any more staff. I think we are as pared down as we can get. And I applaud the efforts of the city manager's office to do more or the same with less. But at this point, I don't think that we can pare down employees anymore. I think we all pay high property taxes, and that goes for renters as well. They just pay pass-through property taxes. When taxes get increased, rents go up. And so we all pay high property taxes, and because of that, I think we deserve to have excellent city services. I think that is a reasonable expectation. I think the city of Evanston should be a great place to work. I think when that happens, the work product is better. So I think we do need to expand the pie. I would like to see Northwestern pay its fair share. I think there are tools in the toolbox to get Northwestern to the table to do that. I think what this next city council needs to do is create a plan going forward with a multi-year, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan. There's a lot of long-term projects that, including the Civic Center, that I think get overlooked to our detriment, and that includes pension payments as well. You get behind on pension payments, you're going to end up paying for it down the road.
Thank you. The next question goes first to candidate Goldring. What do you suggest to make the workload for aldermen, including council and committee meetings, understanding the issues that come before council, and preparing new initiatives more manageable?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? There were several things in there, I'm sorry.
So basically it's how do you make the workload more manageable for everything, including council and committee meetings, and understanding the issues and preparing new initiatives?
That's an interesting question. I actually don't expect, I have high expectations of myself as an alderman, that we will spend the time to understand the issues and speak with our constituents and go to council meetings and go to committee meetings. And I think it should be manageable as it is. That's the job that we sign up for, and that's what I as alderman intend to do, is spend the time necessary to read the packet and meet with constituents. I would like to have advisory councils of experts across the ward and the city that will advise me on issues that I don't think that I know everything. So I would like to have the advisory councils, including a youth advisory council and advisory council on environment and equity. And I will work with all of them to keep me up to date on all of the issues that are facing the ward, my ward, and the city.
Thank you. Candidate Newsman.
As alderman, I would be committed to a responsive, engaged, and transparent city government. And even though it's paid as a part-time position, we'll put as much time into the job as it takes, to live up to those expectations. Certainly it would help the aldermen to have some additional back office support, whether in the time of a budget constraint, I understand adding staff might not be possible, but certainly we're in close proximity to a source of interns that might be able to help process information and do research. I would be willing to discuss the schedule of council and committee meetings. There was a proposal kind of on the table several years ago. I think former Alderman Brian Miller might have made some suggestions as to how the schedule of council meetings could be adjusted to allow better access for more residents. And I will also acknowledge the importance of aldermen being engaged with the community confines of the Civic Center. Through regular ward meetings, office hours, newsletters, and just conversations in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Ward 8, candidate Mitchell.
Ms. Flavin, could you repeat the question, please?
Okay, it is a little bit complicated. So basically, how do you make the workload more manageable for everything that aldermen do, including council and committee meetings, understanding the issues, and preparing new initiatives?
So I think the quick answer to that is work ethic. I intend to commit to do the work, and that's a day in and day out job. It's, Diane mentioned earlier, reading the entire packet prior to the meeting. It's constituent services, following up in the 8th Ward, following in Alderman Rainey's footsteps are big shoes to fill, especially when it comes to constituent services. She is excellent in being responsive and getting things done. And I think that's the expectation of the 8th Ward, in the 8th Ward, and that's the expectation I mean to live up to. I would like to have an open door policy in communication with residents, 8th Ward residents. And to me, that looks like regular office hours, regular ward meetings, town hall meetings. I think one of the criticisms of the public comment section is that it's just a one-way conversation, and that conversation comes too late to change anything. So I think I'm committed to having more back and forth discussions with residents in the 8th Ward and throughout Evanston to try to flesh out issues prior to the night that City Council is voting on them. I think the city can do a better job of engaging with residents and bringing residents into the process, and I intend to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Reed.
Thank you. Yeah, great question here. And, Mr. Mitchell just invoked, Alderman Rainey and her commitment to constituent services. And I think he's on to something there in some regard, but I think there's a reason that the two of us are sitting here. And that reason is because we need to do more. And particularly, there are folks in our community who have historically felt left out of the conversation. So, what I plan to do is hold, before every single council meeting, hold a Zoom meeting. So as I'm doing the homework and going over the packet, we can do it together in a Zoom meeting. And then I can take the voice of the community back to council. And so I've committed to doing that before, and I am reaffirming that commitment here. But the big issue that I think didn't touch on here is the workload, is we have to build equity into this. We understand, I think it was Jonathan, forgive me if I'm wrong, that mentioned the aldermanic salary. The aldermen, make a salary of around $16,000 a year. In fact, I'm giving up my healthy salary as city clerk to run for alderman because I care so deeply about the issues. But I think about the single mothers. The 8th Ward has the highest rates of childhood poverty. And I think about the single mothers like Shelley Carrillo, who's a candidate, a write-in. And I wonder how easy it is for folks who have to balance, several kids, maybe working, minimum or low wage jobs, how they could possibly be an alderman in Evanston. And I think we have to restructure the system to allow for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will go first to candidate Newsma. What strategies would you use to increase civic engagement among people in your ward not often heard from?
Thanks for that question. It is a good segue from the last question, which I didn't quite finish my answer on before the time ran out. One of the things I would do both to increase civic engagement and to make the alderman's job more manageable is take more advantage of the community members that are serving on the city's many boards, commissions, and committees. I had the experience serving on the city's utilities commission that the voice of the experts on that commission was not, it was not solicited. That input was not solicited. So that's one way the city council can and should do a better job of taking advantage of voices in the community. To increase civic engagement more broadly from the folks that regularly appear at meetings, it's incumbent upon us as elected officials to meet people in the community where they are. So we're talking about having regular ward meetings and regular office hours, but make sure that we are reaching out to folks that aren't showing up at these meetings and bringing them into the conversation so that every voice that needs to be heard has a chance to be heard, making sure that they are aware of the conversation so that they do have the ability to be brought into it.
Thank you. Candidate Goldring.
Almost forgot to unmute there. Yeah, I think that I would continue to do what I have been doing as a candidate, which is really, as a candidate, we really need to reach out to every single person in our ward. So I have been knocking on doors. I have been writing newsletters on a weekly basis. I have been, phone calling people, engaging in meetings over Zoom and in person as necessary and required. Masked and socially distanced, of course. And I've been getting some really excellent feedback on that because I've gotten policy even from constituents that have been represented by an alderman. They've asked me questions about things that are going on in the city that they're unaware of. And so I've done the research and gotten back to them and have, people say, wow, I haven't actually heard from somebody on an issue for a really long time. So it's that, one-on-one engagement with people who are looking for answers to things that are going on in the city. Town halls, we need to do all of those things, board meetings, town halls, personal outreach, and also partnering with organizations that are already in the community, the faith-based organizations, and, places like Connections for the Homeless that have have relationships with people that we may not already have relationships with.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Ward 8, Candidate Reed.
Yeah, thank you for this. Again, another wonderful question. And what's great about the 8th Ward is that both Mr. Mitchell and I are elected officials. So you can check our records. What have we done in the positions that we have to reach out to communities that aren't traditionally engaged in our local bodies? Well, in the clerk's office, every single year, every single election, we have sent out thousands of text messages and phone calls to folks who don't traditionally turn out to vote. Part of the clerk's responsibility is being the local election official. And so I have done something that no other clerk in Illinois, and I, dare I say America has done, which is, begin a two-way texting program with folks who don't traditionally come out and encourage them to early vote. So that's one, how we've engaged with folks. Two is when issues have, when prescient issues have arisen in council, there have been a number of occasions where our office has left, our desk and gone out into the community and knocked on doors and helped folks file FOIA requests, help folks get clarity on a number of issues. And, that is my record as clerk, and that is what I will continue to do. But secondly, what's, really important as alderman is representation matters. As I said earlier, the 8th Ward has some of the highest rates of childhood poverty. We're the most ticketed and fined wards in the city. And we are a majority minority district. It has been far too long that the 8th Ward has not had a representative who looks like them. And that's, how I'll reach out to folks who don't traditionally get involved.
Thank you. Candidate Mitchell.
Thank you. And thank you to Clerk Reed for the softball to my work in Ridgeville. My work in Ridgeville does speak for itself. And I think a good example is the equity work that we've done there over the last 2 years. About 2 years ago, right after I was elected, a community member came to me and said he intended to make a public comment regarding racial inequity and historical inequity at Ridgeville. And I invited him to get put on the agenda, right? At public comment, there's a time limit and there's no back and forth. So I worked with him, we put it on the agenda and gave him time to speak, and as much time as he wanted, and it allowed for a back and forth. And coming out of that, we had a sit down meeting with him and some other community members. We put money in the budget towards equity work, equity trainings. We made a contract with the YWCA as well as Dr. Pat Effiam. That has continued into the next year. And then strategies to increase public engagement is you got to go to stakeholders, go to people where they're at. I like Diane's idea of engaging with groups that are already doing the work in the community, church groups, nonprofits, advocacy groups. It's not that hard, but you got to go to them. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will go first to candidate Goldring. What should Evanston do to reduce violence and shootings, particularly among youth? Should additional resources be provided for police efforts or for youth outreach programs or in other areas?
Yeah, this is really one of the, if not the most important question. And I just want to, say my heart goes out to the families of the victims of gun violence recently. As a mom, I can't even imagine. Yeah, I think that we need to have a really holistic view of public safety in our community, and public safety needs to include engaging our youth we need to have jobs programs for them, maybe look at extending the mayor's summer job program to something year round. We restructured the youth and young adult division some years ago and reduced our youth social work staff. And so that, I think, had an impact. We do have our youth and young adult division, and I absolutely think that our youth and young adult division is key under Kevin Brown, and now it needs to be fully resourced and fully staffed, because our youth really need to be employed and productive and feel like their voices are being heard in our community.
Thank you. Candidate Newsom.
Thank you, Jan. And my heart goes out to the families of the victims of the several recent shootings in Evanston, and not only to the families of those victims, but their friends, their neighbors, their communities, our community. Interrupting the cycle of violence and the readily available handguns is something that we all need to be committed to addressing as a community. So I would approach this problem from two perspectives. One, from the perspective of social justice. I want to make sure that we are providing structures that offer not just a safety net to disadvantaged communities, but a ladder out. So that means jobs programs. That means the youth and young adult program, which has been doing such a good job in Evanston under previous leadership. I think the good work continues. We need to keep doing that work and keep investing in interrupting violence and make sure that we have mediators and we can interrupt that cycle of violence. I'd also like to address the fact that guns are readily available. This is an issue that goes beyond just Evanston. It addresses Second Amendment issues. So until we can overturn DC versus Heller, there's not much we can do. We can continue gun buyback programs, and I think my timer is about to run out. So I'd be happy to talk more about that later.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Ward 8, candidate Mitchell.
Thank you. I think if we're serious about addressing gun violence in our community, we need to put resources towards addressing gun violence in our community. For me, that looks like funding restorative justice, identifying people who might go down that path, and putting resources towards other opportunities. I think those opportunities can look like job programs, can look like the youth and young adult division. I think, specifically in the 8th Ward, and this goes back to your previous question, how do you get to people who are traditionally not involved? Well, what if we got young people and paid them to be involved and to reach out to seniors who maybe don't have the access to the internet like the rest of us? I think identifying the high-risk individuals and communities, and putting resources in terms of social workers, broader programs. Some of the work at Ridgeville that we've done through the Mayor's Youth Summer Employment Program is starting a Youth Grow program that kind of offers hands-on experience in a trade, in gardening and landscaping, on a path towards landscape architecture. And it gets people outside, connected with nature and other people.
Thank you. Candidate Reed.
Thank you. Again, my heart also goes out to all of the recent victims here in Evanston of gun violence. We know in the 5th Ward, we had 2 instances, or 2 young men who were killed recently. And then in the 8th Ward, at IHOP, we had someone who was gunned down. And when I think about those issues, it really goes back to 2 things: youth, issues with a lack of support for our youth, for particularly our Black and brown youth. I personally, I've worked on campaigns all across the city, and I have been held up at gunpoint with a gun pointed at my head. And my immediate thought when that happened was, wow, these folks are so lacking of resources and so lacking of opportunity that they take this. And I couldn't blame them in the moment. And so what we have to do is really provide resources for our youth. That's jobs. That's real opportunities where our youth can see themselves thriving. Yes, we need more social workers, and yes, we need, along those lines, but we really need to let our youth know that particularly our young Black men, that they are valued in our community, that they can be holistic members of our community. And again, I think representation matters, and having someone who comes from that lived experience and communicating that message and being affirmed by our own community that is the case, that folks aren't irredeemable, is key. And then mental health is the next thing. We can prevent these murders with folks who have mental health issues by catching it up front. Thank you.
Thank you. For the next group of questions, Ward 8 will go first, and candidate Reed, you will be first with the next question. Reparations in Evanston have received national attention. How should City Council work with residents to determine priorities using reparations funds?
Yes, wonderful question. And this is what's key. The 8th Ward Alderman, the next 8th Ward Alderman, will be a key member of determining reparations. And anyone who believes in equity understands how important it is to have folks who are from the harmed community leading that effort. And as someone whose great-grandparents moved to Evanston in the 1920s, in the early 1920s, I have that lived experience, that generational harm that has been passed down, and that generational understanding that has been passed down. And so first and foremost, what we have to do is take a step back and create a participatory process, akin to participatory budgeting, where Black and brown folks are leading this effort and meaningfully, in a meaningful way, both determining the feasibility of various programs and then voting on it and determining how the city of Evanston repairs their harm and whether that repair is sufficient enough. I think it is so key that, again, that the next 8th Ward Alderman understands how critical our systems of white supremacy and anti-Blackness have, how that has harmed the community, and how the way to fix that harm is really by putting, folks from that experience in the driver's seat. And I hope that, 8th Warders agree with that.
Thank you. Candidate Mitchell.
Thank you. I obviously come at the reparations conversation from a different background. I got into the law from my experience as a facilitative mediator. And that is the leadership that I would bring toward the reparations conversation in the 8th Ward. As Clerk Reed said, the 8th Ward Alderman does sit on the subcommittee of reparations. And as 8th Ward Alderman, I promise to bring my talent and work ethic to making reparations successful in Evanston. That said, I'm not from a background that I would be a beneficiary. And so there I would use my facilitative mediation skills to invite Black 8th Ward residents to be the leaders of that conversation. And I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but I think what it would look like would come from the community and not necessarily myself. Also, another thing that I can bring is this is going to be challenged legally, and just in this first step of reparations has gotten a notice of a legal challenge, and so we need to create this in a way that's legally sound and legally defendable, because the people who are against this are going to fight this all the way to the Supreme Court, and so we need to have solid footing to make this successful.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the 4th Ward candidate Goldring.
Hi, thanks for this question. Yes, this has been on the top of mind for a lot of residents since the current proposal is going to council on Monday, and chances are it's going to pass. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about the process and how it all came about. So, as a white person, I would listen to the voices, other voices. I'm not the person, as Matthew said, I'm not the person who has been harmed or not come from a descendant of person who's been harmed. So I'm not the one to decide how people spend their reparations funds. My priorities would be ensuring that the process is inclusive, and also making sure that the program is fully funded. I think I heard another alderman say that, at the rate we are going, $25,000 per person, only 400 residents would be served with the $10 million fund. So we need a way to determine fairly what the actual award is, that we make sure and make this a priority, and in funding it with the dollars, the cannabis tax dollars, and perhaps look to other private entities and bring them into the process so that we have enough funds to adequately address the harm.
Thank you. Candidate Newsma.
Thank you. When it comes to reparations, I'd like to start by saying we have moved beyond the if we should do it question, and now we're talking about the how we should do it question. So that in and of itself is a huge step in the right direction. And because we are the first community contemplating a program like this, the question of how is really important for us to address. It's really important for us to get that right, because all eyes are on our community, and we will be establishing a template and a precedent for better or for worse. But let's acknowledge that we have advanced the discussion to this point, and the fact that we're having a robust community discussion on how we should implement reparations should in no way surprise anybody. This is normal and natural and to be expected. And my commitment as an alderman will be to ensure that the process by which compensation mechanisms and eligibility are determined, I want to ensure that process is open and engaged and transparent and takes input from all of the voices that need to be heard. And those are the voices in the Black community, whether they decide that they want cash payments or educational credits or jobs training or housing assistance. Not for me to say. I want to make sure that the process is fair and open, and then work to implement that process, implement their recommendations on a long-term basis.
Thanks. The next question will go first to candidate Mitchell. Do you believe that fair housing enforcement in Evanston is adequate? Are there actions you would support to identify and end discrimination among landlords toward renters and banks toward home buyers? Candidate Mitchell.
Thank you. I think any landlord, any bank that is using discriminatory practices towards any Evanston resident should absolutely be on our radar as the City of Evanston government. And we should proactively go after them. I think it's absolutely unacceptable if there's discriminatory practices. That said, I think what we don't think of as discriminatory practices is affordable housing, right? The socioeconomic discrimination. If you don't have enough money to buy a house or rent an apartment, then it's not considered discrimination. But I think that's what we need to do as a community is have a widespread overall plan to increase affordable housing for lower class, middle class folks, working folks. We need those folks in Evanston. And I think there's a lot of different proposals that we can do to get there. One, I'm really interested in non-traditional ownership models, land trusts, public-private partnerships with nonprofits whose goal is to create affordable housing, not to create profit. I think zoning should be on the table. I think I applaud the auxiliary building units. I think we can do more.
Thank you. Thank you. Candidate Reed.
Yeah, and again, yes, this is still a huge issue in our community. And again, this is another reason why representation matters, because while campaigning, I have talked to residents who have faced this very discrimination. There's someone who told me about getting denied a rental application because of a criminal record. You know, not you know, something crazy, but just because they had a criminal record, and that is against the law. Cook County recently passed a law that recently went into effect that prohibits that. The City of Evanston needs to get that law on the books. The City of Evanston has partnered with the Metropolitan Tenant Organization in order to combat this rental discrimination. And I think we need to bolster that. We need to ensure that our residents know that they can have access to this resource that the City of Evanston has contracted with. And as Alderman, I will make sure that residents understand what their rights are. I've been someone who has a proven track record, a very clear proven track record of standing up for the rights of Evanstonians and ensuring that those rights are not trampled upon. And I will ensure that as Alderman, particularly with folks, are not low class, right? We don't have low class folks. We have lower income folks, folks who are experiencing hardship in this moment, living in the 8th Ward. And I want to make sure that those folks have access to every resource the city has. Another thing that we have to do is bolster our property standards division. And to ensure that we're doing adequate
Thank you.
Residential testing.
Thank you. The next question will go first to candidate Newsma.
Any incidents of discriminatory lending or discriminatory leasing practices that is identified in Evanston should be made known, should be highlighted, and should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We sadly realize that discriminatory practices continue, even though they have been outlawed for quite some time. And the issue of unfair housing, goes back much further than the civil rights laws of the 1960s. So we have a lot of work still to do, and this ties into the reparations program as well. But if we're talking about affordable housing, as I've said in other contexts, it's a multifaceted and complex problem that requires an all of the above solution. Several candidates have already mentioned the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which provides increases the supply of smaller scale rental units in town. I want to make sure we are providing family size units, multi-bedroom units. One way of doing this would be an anti-deconversion ordinance, which prohibits 2 and 3 flat buildings from being converted into a single family home, so that we can have affordable housing throughout Evanston and not just in multi-story high-rise buildings.
Thank you. Candidate Goldring.
Thanks. I was working with Joining Forces for Affordable Housing to administer the Cook County's Community Conveners Grant. This was before COVID, when we could all still get together, and administering it was we were getting getting qualitative data from people who had experienced who were housing insecure, and we got people together and heard their stories in Evanston of being discriminated against, not just for their race, but they were discriminated against, like Devon said, because they had a record, because they had families, they had young children, because one person who had, she had experienced domestic violence, and she had moved several times, and her landlord that followed her, so she wasn't able to get housing. So we do know that does exist here in Evanston, and that's the kind of thing that I was working on prior to COVID. One other idea, one other discriminatory housing practice that we have is the brothel law. Who are we to say, families, what a family is? We should allow unrelated people to live in the same space. Right now, you can't have a certain number of unrelated people. There's restrictions on the number of unrelated people that can live together.
Thank you. Candidate Reed will be first with the next question. What action should City Council take to make sure that climate action and resilience plans goals are met? How can the city create partnerships with civic organizations and businesses to advance these goals?
Yeah, again, this is somewhere where, I have a record of working on these issues. As I mentioned at the top of the meeting here, I founded the Plates Over Waste initiative, which was working on, the nexus, as I said, between sustainability and environmental justice issues, particularly around food waste. And what we did there was we did just what you're describing. We convened many, if not all, of the local stakeholders in the issue, particularly of sustainability, and we brought them to the table and we discussed the issue, and we moved forward on a plan. The council did not adopt our measures, but it was a very good discussion and highlighting of these issues. And to implement CARP, I think what we have to do is we have to be serious about what we were calling for with the Plates Over Waste campaign, is putting ordinances on the books. That ensure that we are going to meet our CARP goals. We know that right now, what we've been doing to meet our goals is relying on renewable energy credits. And those RECs that we rely on, are good, but it's not making change here in Evanston. And so, we know that the top producers of climate change are buildings, traffic, and beef agriculture and specificity in agriculture. And so we need to be putting laws on the books that help tackle those three top producers of carbon.
Thank you. Candidate Mitchell.
Thank you. I think the CARP plan is one of the most impressive pieces of work that this city council has done. I think the work of the next city council is instituting that plan into action. I agree with your analysis, like how are you going to reach out to people? How are you going to get the community involved to get it done? And I think you need to go to stakeholders where they're at. And we are all stakeholders when it comes to the climate and sustainability. So I also think we need to have an environmental justice lens when looking at the CARP plan. We know that in the past, the harms are disproportionate to folks that don't have means. And it's not hard to imagine that that's gonna continue going forward. And so that our plan needs to, one, acknowledge the past harms, and two, make a new model so that those folks are not, again, disproportionately harmed. I think we need to reach out to the groups that are already doing the work. I think we need to work towards energy independence. I'd be very excited to use our community resources towards creating our own renewable energy. I think what you see in Texas is a good example of how we need to localize production. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Ward 4, candidate Goldring.
Thank you. Yeah, we need, this is another all hands on deck. We first of all need to make sure that implementing CARP is listed as a city council goal, which is not right now, which I think is a glaring omission. We need to use ward meetings and communications to engage our constituents on the sustainability efforts. I really do think we need to hire another person in our Office of Sustainability, because right now, we only have one person in there, and I don't think that that's adequate. Our budget, again, needs to reflect our values. Updating building codes to improve overall efficiency beyond minimum state standards. We need a citywide plan. We talk about Lake Michigan's, erosion, and rising water level is causing erosion along the, one of our most valuable city resources, which is the lakefront. And we have pollution, in our water because there's runoff by all of our water sources. So we need to address green infrastructure. This is, again, 90 seconds isn't enough to say all the things that we need to do for our environment. Promote carbon neutral transportation, walking and biking, making our downtown area and our other business areas a lot more walkable and bike friendly. Expanded urban canopy especially in our Black and brown neighborhoods, which historically have been under-resourced.
Thank you. Now, the next question will be the last question.
I'm sorry, I didn't have an opportunity.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you for allowing me that opportunity. And I would just like to say how pleased I am that we are all talking about the topic of sustainability. Not just the 4 candidates on this forum, but every candidate in every race now is talking about sustainability. That was not the case even 40 years ago when I led an issues forum as president of Citizens Greener Evanston, led a forum for the 2 mayoral finalists. And the work that Citizens Greener Evanston and others have done over the last decade to bring this topic to the table, I feel like that work has been successful because we are now all talking about it without having to be reminded by Citizens Greener Evanston. So what should the city do? I could go on, but to just name a few points. Number 1, I would make CARP implementation a city council goal. Number two, I would pass an environmental justice ordinance. We have an environmental justice resolution. I would upgrade that to an ordinance, which would give it some teeth. That does pick up on CARP's commitment to equity as one of its guiding principles. I would, talking about renewable energy, I would expand access to renewable energy by improving on our current program, which includes RECs, as Devon has pointed out, but let's look for ways we can evolve that program and do better in the future. Let's also talk about access to green spaces, public transportation, biking and walking, and be happy to talk more about this if anybody wants to reach out to me. Thanks.
Thank you. And now we will go to the last question. I apologize again, candidate Newsman. I was just looking ahead.
No problem.
So what specific strategies would you introduce to achieve an effective workforce development program? And this question goes first to candidate Mitchell.
Thank you. So I think one important aspect of that is the city's relationship to District 65 and 202, and in terms of work and Oakton Community College. If we're looking at workforce development, we need to partner with people who can do that training. I think Evanston Township High School and Oakton Community College are prime candidates for that. I think the world's changing, and I think it's overly simplistic and just wrong to think that everybody needs to go on a 4-year college track to be successful. I think there's a lot of other opportunities out there, and we need to connect our community members, young community members, and also folks who are transitioning from one career to another. We need the resources out there. I've been very impressed. I know the YWCA has been doing some job trainings, job skill trainings recently in the tech sector, the computer sector. The jobs of yesterday are not necessarily going to look like the jobs of tomorrow. And I think we need to anticipate what those jobs of tomorrow are going to be. And again, back to the holistic, that the green energy is going to create a new industry, and computers already have, and we need to prepare people for that future.
Thank you. Thank you. Candidate Reed.
Yeah, wonderful question, as always, with the league. As we said, Oakton Community College, ETHS, will be our key partners in workforce development, partnering with the city. I think, Oakton Community College, for example, is looking into the possibility of locating, a satellite campus here in Evanston. I think the city needs to encourage that as much as we possibly can. So that's one. Two, it's about those jobs of tomorrow, as was mentioned. It's about particularly jobs relating to sustainability. We know it was a part of the history 100 years ago that Black and brown folks, and putting an equity lens on it, were left out of many of the when we were switching to electricity, which was driven by coal and oil, and we're switching to having roads and cars as our main forms of transportation, and television and telephones. And as we were making those monumental shifts, Black and brown folks are left behind. And I think as we're making this shift this time to autonomous driving, as we're making the shift to clean energy, as we're making the shift to the new forms of communication, we need to ensure that our Black and brown residents are at the forefront here. But also, most importantly, I think we need to focus on my generation. The next generation is focused on entrepreneurship. We don't want to work at Walmart and Target and be blind machines. I think we need to equip our residents with the resources to create their own destiny.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll go to Ward 4, candidate Newsman. Now you're muted.
I'm sorry. Here we go. If we're talking about workforce development, we do need, this is District 65, this is ETHS, Oakton Community College, they are already doing this to a holistic approach should be part of that. That includes, from the city's perspective, things like the mayor's summer youth employment program. Let's also make sure we are, as a city, investing appropriately in economic development to create jobs for which people. And I think there's a lot we can do here, as both of the previous candidates have mentioned, in terms of pivoting to a green economy. I am working with some folks that are committed to changing a Rust Belt economy into a green belt economy, and making sure that new jobs that are created, whether it's in solar installations or wind turbine installations, or very close to home energy efficiency retrofits, making sure that those jobs are addressing needs in Black and brown communities, and that equity is part and parcel of any workforce development program.
Thank you. Candidate Goldring.
Thanks. One of the problems with going last is that everyone's already said all the really good ideas. In addition, partnering with District 202 and Oakton, and also making sure that residents are aware of programs that exist already, such as, the Youth Job Center and YOU. They do programs, and partnering with them to make sure that those programs are adequately funded. Northwestern just recently committed $400,000 to a business incubator for minority businesses. So making sure residents are aware of how they can get access to those funds. And also, at the state level, there are programs and grants that are available for, economic development and job development. Making sure that we work with the state of Illinois, if we're talking about green energy jobs, to pass the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which is something that was introduced, I want to say February, but it's up again for a vote. So we want to make sure to partner to make sure to get that passed. So everybody said everything else already, so thanks.
All right. Now we are going to go to the closing statements. Candidates will have 90 seconds, and the statements will be given in reverse order from the opening statements. So Ward 8 will go first, and Candidate Reed will go first. Well, I don't know why he's having trouble unmuting, but I think we'll just go to Candidate Mitchell and come back to Candidate Reed. I'm sure he can figure it out.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be the next alderman of the 8th Ward. I think I will be the best advocate for the entire 8th Ward. My professional experience is in conflict resolution, advocacy, and facilitative mediation. And those are the skills that I'm going to use to be successful. I think the work of this next council is instituting successful and sustainable models and best practices. I want Evanston to be a national leader in police reform, in sustainability and equity, and in reparations. And in some of those, we can find out what works well in other places and institute those models. In the reparations example, we are creating the first model, and we need it to be successful. I think there's a lot to be said for creating collective models as opposed to hierarchical models. And that's the approach I have towards 8th Ward leadership, is bringing people to the table, reaching out directly to stakeholders, and getting the folks who are the recipients of city services, good and bad, a voice at the table to institute new models on how we can do better, because we can do better. And I'm excited for this next city council. There's going to be a new mayor, there's going to be a new city clerk, and there's going to be a lot of new aldermen, alder people. And I am really excited to be a part of that process. And early voting starts on Monday. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, candidate Reed. I'm glad-
Yes, sorry about that. My button down in the corner wasn't working. All right. So again, I thank the league and all of the candidates for being here. Again, my name is Devon Reed. I'm running for 8th Ward Alderman. I've served as city clerk for the last 4 years. What's brilliant about this race is while we're both myself and Mr. Mitchell are newcomers to this position, we are both elected officials who have a track record. And I compel folks to look at our track records, hold them up to the light, and compare our words with our actions. And over again, my words have matched my actions. And that's why every single grassroots organization that has vetted 8th Ward candidates has endorsed my campaign, because I have a clear track record of doing what I say and saying what I do. And, again, our records speak for themselves. If you're looking for someone who's going to focus on, we have to have an alderman who meets the moment, right? As was just mentioned, reparations is the moment we are in now. So if you believe in giving people a seat at the table, it is imperative that we have an alderman of the 8th Ward who represents those lived experiences. We know that equity and policing are at the cornerstone of what the next 4 years will be focused on. Again, it is imperative that the 8th Ward elects an alderman who comes from those lived experiences, who has a track record of convening the necessary voices to move forward on policy. And that is why I'm running, and that is why I hope to earn your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Candidate Newsmer.
Thank you, Jan. I think it's telling that the 4 candidates on this forum today, among us, there is no incumbent. It's clear from the results of the primary election in Ward 4 and Ward 8 that it is time for a change in leadership at the city council level. And as we move forward to the next step of the process, I want to acknowledge that while it's time for a change, that I also have the background and experience to make myself the right person for that job. My professional experience as an engineer, my experience in the community, working with Citizens Greener Evanston, the Utilities Commission, the Democratic Party of Evanston, has made me a part of the process at the Civic Center, witness to the process at the Civic Center, showed me how things work for better or for worse. And that's experience that I would like to put to work for the people of the 4th Ward and for everyone in Evanston. I want to make Evanston the most equitable community, the most environmentally sustainable community. I want to make sure we can afford to do this through appropriate economic development strategies, and do this work as an alderman who is engaging all the voices that need to be heard in the community. I've been endorsed by Reclaim Evanston and by the Sierra Club, and I would invite everyone out to Larimer Park in the 4th Ward tomorrow afternoon at noon to meet and greet, and we'll say hi and a nice day in the park tomorrow.
Thank you. Candidate Goldring.
Thank you again for this opportunity. Back in the late 1990s, I started a 5K that was in the middle of the city of Chicago, and people told me that it could not be done. I recruited a committee, and I worked with city officials and sponsors and residents. And after the first successful race, one of my committee members told me that working with me, she never doubted that the race would happen, even though it had never been done before. Here in Evanston, I manage over 100 volunteers who serve free meals to low-income seniors for Jennifer's Edibles restaurant. And Jennifer has told me many times that she is thankful that she doesn't need to even think about delivery logistics, so that she can focus on what she does best, which is preparing the meals. And this is what 4th Ward residents have told me that they want in an alderman. They want someone who will advocate for them and get things done. And I am that person. I have broad experience in banking, in the nonprofit sector, and in small business. I have collaborated with a wide variety of people across Evanston to work on issues such as housing and food insecurity and advocacy for families of children with special needs. I received the most votes in the Democratic Party of Evanston's endorsement session, and I am proud to have the endorsement of OPAL, Evanston Fight for Black Lives, and Community Alliance for Better Government, 3 progressive organizations that advocate strongly for equity and good governance.
Thank
I
you.
hope to earn your vote on April 6th.
Thank you. This concludes the forum. It will be available tomorrow on the League's website at lwve.org and on their YouTube channel. Just a reminder, early voting begins this Monday, March 22nd, and election date is Tuesday, April 6th. Thank you to the candidates. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. And thank you to the Evanston Public Library. Happy voting.